And if you'd like to get involved in climate work here in Easthampton, definitely talk with Connie and Steve and with myself if you want to get involved with our work here at Arcadia. So with that intro, I'm going to turn it over to Steve, who is going to moderate tonight's conversation.
Thank you. Donna, first thing, there's no such thing as a shameless plug. And I will go even further. First of all, to thank Audubon for lending this beautiful space. And also, hey, if you want some Audubon bling, it's right out there. And they can kind of catch up with you if they want to, or can put an order in or whatever. But enjoy the space. Thank you, really coming out. Wow, we didn't know how many folks. And I said to Connie, oh, it may not be a big crowd, but the last time we had an event here, it was like during a deluge. We thought actually no one coming, we told that as well. So Connie did a lot of work to pull this together. I wanted to take an opportunity to thank her. This hopefully is something that is happening almost everywhere. Last year, we had a candidates forum in the state representative race, and I think a lot of people liked it. While it's true I'm involved with climate organizations, I will just say as a member of the Easthampton Dems, chair, that I've also been involved because I think that every election should include this. And so I've been advocating for this, and so it will hopefully come to pass. These are hard issues, and make no mistake about it. So we're very appreciative for all the candidates to show up to do that. Before we get to all the candidates, though, there is one race for which there's only one candidate, and that candidate is the present mayor. So we thought we'd give an opportunity to Mayor LaChapelle to kind of give us the state of the city, in vis-a-vis our climate policy. So thank you for being here, and I want to give you a few moments to give us a sense of it.
Thank you very much. I would thank you for the invitation, but I also, if you guys have not seen the flyer, a great group of co-sponsors, Easthampton Climate Action, the Easthampton Democratic Committee, Climate Action Now, Western Mass, Mass Audubon, and Arcadia Wildlife Sanctuary and Mothers Out Front. So thank you very much for putting this together. Before I go over kind of the green state of the city, I am thankful to not have an opponent for a whole bunch of different reasons. But tonight, I am very thankful because when I read the question, that's something else. And I have also made notes and be looking for your answers to decide who to vote for. So just to kind of put that out. As far as the green state of the city, I'll start with a smaller grant in Potawatomi that we've just signed an MOU with PVPC, Patty is here, around the look back at green communities and what we've done as a city, around green communities and climate across all the departments to kind of start a living history documentation of that. So as we go forward, we know what we have done and what we need to do, but also align that with different pots of money that would come available. And I think that's super important because it's really easy to look forward and march straight ahead and know what's in front of us, but we have to understand what's in back of us, what we have done as far as the environment. And that process is just started. We were one of the first towns, then cities, in the Commonwealth to become a green community. And we're very aggressive on that program with the street lights, but as well as insulation and improvements to how the municipal buildings function, what kind of energy they use. That is a big focus of my administration now, but also in the next 2 years, because we've had a lot of deferred maintenance and we have a lot of buildings that are huge, huge energy kind of drains on our budget and taking a look. And certainly our schools that exist now are a big thing. Around that too is protection of the environment. So we've we've gotten the Municipal Vulnerability Program designation. We have a planning process that's almost done. We're prioritizing with a lot of regional partners to go for an MVP action grant, which, around culverts and water well heads, and also what we're going to do with the flooding, just in this area. So that has been a focus. I think it's very important when we talk about these actions in Easthampton, it's truly regional. Pollution as well as erosion and the need for mitigation to protect our water supply don't end at the borders of Easthampton. It's something we have to look at really as a region. I've had some interesting conversations with Pioneer Valley Planning Committee about looking at our drinking water, not just in Easthampton, but how we're affected by the Barnes aquifer, as well as the aquifers that service Westfield and West Springfield, and there have been some very grave, dark stories about Westfield's water that we're paying close attention to. Our integrative stormwater plan, it's about 900 pages long, and what we're doing right now, we must do it for the state and the federal government. We had a huge grant to get it done. We've just commissioned another rate study to look in detail how we will afford these improvements. We're looking at $22 million in infrastructure and climate-related projects over 5 years, and that's a federal guideline. You just saw on the news that we got some Green Community Action Grants, and those are 2 projects, the HVAC at the wastewater, those are projects that are on that massive list. So real focus going forward is we're taking a look at that list over and over again, and when we can match it with grant money, we're doing so. Or for a capital improvement piece of equipment, we're making sure that that comes to the foreground, so we're mitigating that huge amount of money to meet the federal and state requirements. We also gained 2 points on the new school project for elevating the LEED certification. We are right now working on a letter with the Center for Technology and Environment down in Springfield to do a citywide letter, an email blast around mass save for both businesses and residents. I think we all forget the valuable resources that you can get for basically free, and that program changes every year, so I want to communicate out on that. We have also looked, just initiated in the same MOU, some technical assistance with PVPC and the Department of Energy Resources, taking a look at what comes next, what we can do around water, but also to protect our energy that we have until we migrate to something cleaner. Was able also to mitigate a potential environmental hazard on Lower Mill Pond. There was a pump house, and we really pressed the Lieutenant Governor's office to find an extra $100,000. The building was about to fall into Lower Mill Pond and actually create some environmental issues with the One Ferry project. So that is now down, and we're waiting for the right weather to cap it off. And that will be a fishing dock for the community. We're hoping to make it ADA accessible with a bridge. From there, I'll jump to another strong historical effort on Easthampton, but I think it's getting a little more important now, is preserving land and really classifying land to a use that is appropriate and helpful going forward, but really conserves the natural resources that we get from that land. And not too far from here, $400,000 park grant, which was generously matched by our CPA, preserving 11 acres on the viewshed of Mount Tom that the city will own, and then 11 acres that will be owned by Kestrel. What the city bought is much more functional as a park. It'll have the view shed, and as well, we're looking now for a trail grant to get folks up 100% ADA accessible. So regardless of how you choose to mobilize or do mobilize, you're going to get to that view shed. Let me just see here. I just want to mention one last thing that has come up a lot in the last year, and what we're doing about it going forward, and that is actually a re-approved ordinance around hybrid cars and equipment that in 2012 we affirmed that we wanted to migrate to that. We certainly had some conversation about a one-off vehicle. Currently, I am putting together pieces, and we'll probably go to the Energy Advisory Committee. We really need to do a transition plan. about 10 years, 10 to 12 years. A lot of that is the unintended expenses. So the city has mechanics that actually fix our vehicles and equipment. And with the technology that is now on all equipment, hybrid or not, one mechanic or two mechanics, we don't have the equipment. So we're actually migrating from fixing things in-house to having to go to vendors who have the equipment. Hybrid vehicles and equipment is just another level. So right now, we're in this balancing act of trying to purchase vehicles that are as efficient as possible, and to make the next jump to hybrid, we have to think about it. So in the long term, of course, it's less expensive. The car is more expensive up front. Long term, it's less expensive, but we have to get there. We can't just go out and flip our whole fleet in police and fire and DPW, but we're looking to put a plan together, and I will be relying not only on the Energy Advisory Committee, but council candidates. I could go on, but I won't. I'll get to the candidates and can't wait to see your answers and take notes. I think it is, one, it's fantastic to see so many people out, but also, regardless of win or lose or whatnot, it's really just a tremendous field of candidates this year, and very, very focused and intention on making our city even better than this. So I thank you for running. Steve?
Okay, thank you. That was a really great summary, and it'll give us a nice place to kind of start. I want to be clear to all the folks here that there were questions. You probably gathered from what the mayor said. There were 11 questions. In fact, they were sent out to all the candidates in advance, so there's nothing that's big, no snap questions, whatever. Peg Connick, who did respond to it, but she couldn't make it tonight. She's out of town. We did reproduce her answers, and Owen also, we reproduced yours because you got into us. But we kind of leave it that if you want to see them, if we didn't make enough copies, as Connie pointed out earlier, there's a sign-up sheet here, and you can designate an email address if you'd like us to copy you on the answers to get more. The other thing I wanted to say is that, yes, there's a number of candidates here, 11 questions, so I'm the one charged with trying to keep it moving. But for all the folks who came, we feel it's important that you have the opportunity, if there's a question that wasn't asked or something that you have on your mind, that you can ask the question as well. We do have, yes.
Can I just recognize Councilor Tom Peake, who is also unopposed, has joined us in the back of the room, and I just want to acknowledge. And City Council President Joe McCoy, who is not running this year, school committee member, Lori Garcia, Jonathan, it's right there. I've got everything else. Put it on Facebook.
This is the job of the mayor, as charged with having to recognize all of us. When I was in a similar situation, I used to play with the mayor. I would kind of hide in the back or come in a little late to force them back, just to recognize them. But anyway, thank you for that. So, there are pieces of paper here with pens. If anyone has a question that they want to ask, and at the conclusion of this, hand them up and we will get to them. I will also say we're going to shoot for 9 o'clock ending. I think that most folks have want that. There is a whole bunch of stuff here besides the pot of bling. There's a lot of refreshments from Parkhill Otis, some of it, and some from other places, and that's great. Thank you for bringing it. So I think the way to start this, okay, is that we'll give each of the candidates just a little chance to say hello, who they are, and in a very short introductory thing so that we can get right into the questions. So I'll start from that end and give you a chance to introduce yourself.
All right, good. So my name is Laura Douglas. I'm running for City Councilor at Large here in the great city of Easthampton. Been living in Easthampton since 1995. I've opened 3 businesses in the city, including the Apollo Grill. We currently have the Galaxy Restaurant here in town. I'm a registered nurse, work as a nurse manager at Bay State Medical Center. I think that's about it. Go ahead.
Sounds good. I'm Erica Flood. I'm running for Precinct 2. I grew up here in town. I have a background in environmental studies and education. and I currently manage an international program in photography.
Hi everybody. Hola, buenas noches. Mi nombre es Omar Gomez. Hi. Good evening. My name is Omar Gomez. I'm the city council for precinct 2 right now. I grew up in a tropical island, so I really know what is the climate change is affecting everybody, especially my family there. I'm a coach at the high school. I work for my family. They have a bakery in Puerto Rico, and I'm ready to keep working for the city.
Hi everyone, my name is Owen Zaret. I'm currently a city councilor at large. I wanted to just take a quick second just to thank everyone for organizing this. And whoever wrote the questions, I want to thank you for preparing us all for potentially running for Congress or Senate someday. I've lived here in the Pioneer Valley since 1998, here in 2000, in Easthampton since 2000. I'm a homeowner. I'm married with a 10-and-a-half-year-old daughter. I'm a healthcare provider. I do orthopedics. I grew up in Woodbridge, Connecticut, on a dead-end street that abutted water company property, and I spent pretty much all of my childhood and most of my adulthood now when I can in the woods. And so our environment and our canopy and our water is something that's very near and dear to me, especially and including all the animals that live there. And so I love living here in Easthampton and having such a great place like Arcadia Wildlife Sanctuary that we can enjoy, but as we'll talk about tonight, if we don't act soon, we won't be able to enjoy places like this for much longer. So, not to bring the room down, but I'm very much looking forward to running for a second term. I really love the engagement that we have in the city. Thank you everyone who came tonight, and I'm going to pass the mic to Bill.
Thanks. My name is Bill Lynch. I'm running also for city councilor at large. I am running for re-election. I'm on my first term. It's kind of been a half a term, but learned a lot, met a lot of great people in this community. I'm raising two boys. I got a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old, and this is super important to them and the world that we're going to leave for them, and that's what I think hits home. You know, I come to Arcadia and remember the field trips as a student in Maple Street School and coming here and having a good time and running through the banks and having a good time just in making sure that areas like this are kept for our kids, you know. And even the stuff that Marty's doing and some of the trailheads and everything else, those are huge with what we need as a community to continue to survive. I think there's a lot of great questions in here. I look forward to getting involved with it. Thank you guys for hosting us. And you know, I look forward to some great conversation around this and what we can do.
Okay. My name is Lindsay Rothschild. I'm running for city councilor at large. I've lived in Easthampton since 2009 when I moved here from New York City. I've been an educator of ESL, English as a Second Language, for 20 years, 10 years of that in New York City, 10 years at Holyoke Community College, where I also work as an educational technologist. In the last year and a half, I did make a transition to becoming a realtor. And part of what went into that decision was I wanted to get more involved in my community and have a more flexible schedule with my son, who has gone to Arcadia's camp, I think 2 or 3 years in a row, and loves it. And he's a big steward of nature, I would say, and I'm really excited for this conversation. Nicole mentioned in the beginning talking about looking at the history where we've come from. And since my wife and I moved here in 2009, what's really excited us about this community and kept us here and committed to staying here is just the way community residents come together to make change, and that it's actually easy to get involved. So the environment is something that affects all of us, and it's a great way, I think, to bring everyone together, because everyone, doesn't matter if you're you know, out walking the trails with preschoolers, cleaning up garbage, or elders, everyone can get involved and do their part. So I'm really excited about this conversation. Thank you for hosting it.
Okay, well, thank you. Folks, you probably know, but let's just, so it's clear. Some of the candidates here run at large, means that they are on the ballot right across the city, so everyone will have an opportunity, and some are district candidates. We have precincts, and yes, they're district candidates right there. But they've made it clear to you, so just so you know that. The other thing is that being a municipal election in Massachusetts, it's nonpartisan, right? So there aren't parties involved, whatever, which is good. Climate is a nonpartisan issue, okay? And no one political party and no wing of one political party owns the issue and was responsible for it, so we all love it. So, that said, we're gonna start with the questions. I'm gonna start with you, Lindsay. We're gonna do, go through one set, and just to make it, we'll stagger it. So Bill, you'll do the next, and Owen, and, you know, blah, blah, blah,
So
blah.
once it gets to the hard.
So, yeah, so we're gonna, you know, seating is so.
Let me see which one is mine.
So, question number one. In what ways are you concerned about the climate emergency that we are facing, and how do you think that we should respond as a nation? Would you be in favor of a municipal resolution in support of a Green New Deal? If yes, why? If no, why?
Okay. Well, I think the first thing as a nation, we have to acknowledge that it is a crisis. And obviously, right now, we don't have that kind of leadership at the federal level, which is really concerning for, you know, I think we can all agree on a number of levels. I think that I remember in 2006, I was thinking back when the Inconvenient Truth came out. And we felt like, oh, we have to be driven to action. And here it feels like, or when Jimmy Carter said, put a sweater on in the 70s, and yet here we are in 2019, still talking about all these great policies and proposals, and I think it's the time for action, and we are at a crisis point. So I think the first thing is acknowledging that, and as the United States, we should be taking a leadership role, especially since we are contributors to a lot of the carbon emissions in the country.
I'm going to press you, yes or no on the Green New Deal?
Green New Deal. I will answer, in terms of the Green New Deal resolution, as a municipal level, I step back and say, like, what are the goals of our city? The goals of our city are reducing carbon emissions here, to protecting our environment, and my concern about having a municipal resolution about the Green New Deal is alienating residents in our community. This, like as you said, it isn't a political issue, it's for everybody, yet that, even if I personally support the tenants, unless I feel like that's what the majority of the constituents want, is to have a resolution. But to me, it's like, I'm more interested in what action can we take as a community, and what will galvanize our community members to come together. And so pushing forward something that feels politicized to some members of our community could be counterproductive. So that's my concern.
Thank you. Bill?
Thank you. In our communities, a Green New Deal is obviously the right answer. It is something that would be very supportive. How we get there is the question. You know, to put a burden on our business owners financially is where we need to be creative. How can we move that forward and hold them to the same standards? We also have a ton of old school mill buildings that are not efficient. How can we transfer those? And I know the mayor was touching on it, and they're looking at those options. We do have new school buildings being put into place, but now when we look at the old Maple Street and other schools that we have, what do we do with those? How do we get them to where we need to be? It's definitely not a quick answer. It's not a quick conversation. We need to sit there, think creatively as to how we can get there as a community and what grants are available. But I definitely think that we need to work together as a community and collaborate into whatever we can get for the best deal for our community. Thank you.
I think the word that's most important here is crisis. We're in a crisis, right? There's incontrovertible evidence that every single moment that we let that pass us by, while we experience climate change and the pollution that we spill into our atmosphere, we edge closer and closer to damage that we're not going to be able to undo. Our carbon dioxide levels at the highest level they've potentially ever been. The United States is the second highest behind China in terms of carbon dioxide emissions. And every day that we don't do something, we may fall into a pattern where we destroy ecosystems, where we ultimately change the climate and we can't take it back. So the first thing we need to do is we need to put someone in the White House who will actually change this and believe that science is really science and not something otherwise. And we have the power, all of our individual voices here, to make sure that we go out in this next election and vote for someone who's going to do that. So that's number one. It's a problem now, and it was probably a problem 10 years ago, and we may already be 10 years too late. In regards to a Green New Deal, I don't disagree with my colleagues that we have to listen to the will of our people and the people we represent, but I also think that, as Steve said earlier, climate change it's not a partisan issue. It's an issue that we all face every single day. And so, as elected officials, we have the opportunity to lend our voice to the people in Beacon Hill, to the people in Washington, and say, this is what we believe in. We're not going to accept this. We're polluting our earth. We're destroying our world. We need to do something now. So I would 100% support a resolution for a Green New Deal, but non-binding resolutions are just that. They're just words sometimes. And what else can we do with that to make it work? Well, we make things that are binding, like ordinance. So what I would recommend, and something I've already been working on, is a Green New Deal resolution that introduces a package of green initiatives, such as property-assisted community energy, clean energy financing, which will allow our dilapidated mill buildings, which are doing a great job, but they were built at a different time than ours, to be able to put in things like solar and to put in more energy-efficient measures like better windows and insulation. To start looking at our single-use plastics and our polystyrene and what we're throwing into the earth, into the trash cans. Things like municipal composting and municipal recycling. And then we already do have a great ordinance for hybrid cars, but we have to look at better ways to embrace that and to actually enforce it as well. Also, the pesticides that we use, the herbicides that we use, and I think this is a later question, but we need to be very careful what we're spraying on our plants and in our atmosphere and destroying pollinators and critical, but also very fragile elements of our ecosystem. So yes, I support a resolution, but I support a resolution that's a preamble to actually binding legislation that I hope to plan to introduce early on if I'm reelected. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So the question is, one way I'm concerned about the climate emergency, right? Every season we see super hurricanes, a lot of rain, fires, no snow in places there was snow in places they're not supposed to snow. And my concern is that I'm scared. I'm scared that we're not going to have a place to our child and grandchild to. What we can do about it, take actions, and take actions now. If we keep waiting days and days to take actions, so our childs, they're going to suffer. So the best way that we have to do, the best thing that we have to do is taking action now. How we can make actions is a bunch of ways that we can make actions. One is the education. We have to educate our kids that we have to change, that we have to do recycling. If I support the resolution, 100%, 100% I support it. I think we have to invest in what we really need to invest, and that's what it is. But it's not just to make the resolution. I think we have to make the resolution in conjunction to laws. Making the connections to the state rep, senators, and the congressmen, and the senators at Washington. That's the best way to work all together to do something. Because we can make a resolution in Easthampton, and we can tell everybody what we do, what we think about this. But if we don't go out there and push the people that we have to push to do what we have to do now, it's no point to do the resolution. But 100% that I think we have to do the resolution. In conjunction there, we have to be in touch with the other legislators and at every single level, state and federal.
I agree with much of what my colleagues said. We have two 11-year-olds in our household, so again, this is looking at what is the future we're leaving behind for our children. I 100% believe the time for action is now. I agree we've been waiting too long, and I'm not sure what we're waiting for. It's time to move. I think it's time to move swiftly, and I think a lot in the ways where sometimes, you need to just tell people what needs to be done, and they'll catch on, and I think that's the point where we've reached. I 100% would support a Green New Deal resolution, and for a number of reasons. It's not only because of the climate action, but it's also because of its focus on what it names as frontline and vulnerable communities. And I think in Easthampton, we're facing a lot of issues here with affordable housing, and it affects those very communities. That includes the elderly, it includes the low-income workers, it includes the communities of color, the migrant communities, the poor, and the women, and the people with disabilities, and most importantly, our youth. So not only do I think the Green New Deal resolution is important in addressing the climate issues, but I think it's also important in addressing what we need to do to lift up everyone. Everyone deserves a good future. And I think that a resolution would set an example for other communities and call focus to these vulnerable communities as well.
Absolutely. So I agree again with much of what our colleagues are saying. I have 2 young children at home as well, and I wonder what the future is going to look like for them. You know, I'd like to think that I'm not going to be I'd like to think I'm vacationing at the beach. I'd like to think that beach is not here on the shores of Easthampton. You know what I mean? So we don't know what that future is. I'll tell you what worries me the most. We've heard this for years. We've heard this for years. And what change have we really seen? We've seen some changes, but we need leaps of change. You know, we don't need small steps, we need leaps at this point in order to stop what's happening to this world. And how are we gonna do that? I look at the Green New Deal as a paradigm change. You know, what it's saying is that we need to change, and we need to change quickly, and we need to change a lot of what we do. What worries me about the Green New Deal is that we're talking about going up against capitalism, and that's what this country was founded on, and that's what this country runs on. I think a lot of the reasons we're here is because of the capitalism that we're all sort of captured by as well. How many of us use Amazon when we want to order something? How many of us live by our conveniences? And a lot of things that we talk about changing, we have to reach into our hearts and not only look to our government for resolutions and laws, we have to look to ourselves to say, what are we willing to give up? What are we willing to change? Because that's the greatness that we need to change now to actually having an effect. It has to happen quickly. We're talking 11 years now, they're saying, before we see some permanent and irreversible effects on our environment. You know, so I look at the Green New Deal as saying, yes, let's do it. How are we going to do it, and what are we willing to change to do that?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. We're going to now get into more specifics and ask the questions really get this. But the first one we'll just start off with is, we'll start with you, Bill. If reelected, or elected for the other candidates, what would be the first action that you would take to address the climate crisis? Just the first. You understand maybe others.
I have 13 that I wanted to go through.
Choose one.
All right. You know, I think what I spoke upon earlier would be the finances and how do we make it happen. So we have this, you know, plastic bottle ordinance where a certain square footage you have to have mandatory recycling on your plastic bottles. Are we following up with them? Are we finding the businesses that aren't adhering to the city ordinance? That would help generate some funds. Looking at our carbon footprint and what we're leaving behind as a community and where we can change that, take it away, recycle, do whatever we need to do and hold people to a higher standard, especially when we already have things on the books. You know, I think that's important to take what we already have in the books and generate some funds for the violators that might be out there, because I think it's important that we generate money to continue the progress.
Thank you.
I actually, unfortunately answered this already, but I'll reinforce my statement actually, because sometimes it's important to repeat themselves. I think everyone here said how important it is to act now, actually probably act yesterday, and like I said, 10 years ago. So the first thing I would do is take action, and that would include what I mentioned before, and introduce a series of ordinances to the city council that address some of the things we're talking about. How can we better enable our city to use more energy efficient items like solar and better windows and things like that. We have the potential here for hydraulic power, even if it's small, every bit counts. Again, I mentioned single-use plastics, straws, etc. You know, what are we going to do in our city? Now, Bill mentioned, and I think Lindsay mentioned also, we have to be sensitive to our residents. So the last thing I would want to do, and I think the last thing any of my colleagues would want to do, would be to introduce legislation that's a hardship on the people in the city, right? So, you know, while we're going to be talking about ways that we can reduce our carbon footprint, like Bill mentioned, and ways that we can otherwise increase our energy independence, we also have to listen to people. We have to have town halls. We have to get feedback. So maybe we want to ban plastic bags like they've done in other places. Well, we've tried to do that before, and there was some pushback, and potentially for good reasons. So is there a way that we can inch towards making this effective? Is there a way that we can take leaps towards making it effective? And again, to echo what Laura said before, I think we have to take more leaps. So while I do also respect the feedback of my community, we also have to think about what we're failing to accomplish when we don't take some risks. So, yeah.
I'd say that's
That's pretty good. Yeah.
you got it.
Yeah.
Now me, I don't have to wait to be elected because I'm already a city council, and I've been working hard to defend the environment. One of the things that I did was when DPW asked for a car, there wasn't a fuel efficient. I worked really hard to don't buy that car until they order a new car that is fuel efficient or hybrid. We have to go that way, and I'm going to keep doing that. I'm going to keep working hard for the environment. So I don't have to be elected. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing now. And what I'm doing now is working for the environment, and I will keep doing it for the next 2 years.
Thank you. Erica.
Well, so as a new council member, I would definitely have a lot of listening to do and understanding what are the capabilities, what's an option, where can I get involved, and what action can I take as my first action? That was a really tough question when I was sitting there thinking, oh, I have a million ideas. I would like to see at the local level more recapture, more regreening of space. So for instance, one project that I would really love to move forward is behind Parsons Street School. We have a 1 acre lot that when the school was sold and turned into market rate housing, there's an acre there that's ready to become some kind of a community space. And I would really like, and I know that there's already plans that have been drawn up by the Conway School of Design, and I would like to take that project off the shelf and see that move forward and see us integrate ideas of permaculture and local food access in a neighborhood that is walkable, and it could be a space where education can really happen on the day-to-day level. Neighbors would have somewhere to gather. There would be actual, kids can see what this is, in their community. It's a tangible project that they can begin to learn by just going there. So, I mean, that would be one project that I would really love to kick off the shelf. Maybe that's too ambitious when you're first getting, your legs on the council, but that's an idea I have, so.
Good one, too. So again, as a new counselor, if I was elected, I think the very first thing, to be very honest with you, is I would need to do a personal audit of myself as far as what is happening in the city now. Where do we stand? Where are the opportunities? Not being a current counselor, I don't have privy to necessarily everything here, things that everyone here does have. So I want to know what the state of the city is now. What are the plans that we're doing? What opportunities may we have, or what may be missing? I think working really closely with the Downtown Planning Commission, as we do see the schools being transferred into something in the future, maintaining the green space there. Just like Erica was saying, for families, maintaining some space for people to gather and families to have some place to go would be a wonderful thing. But again, I think as a city councilor, it's educating myself before I can ever make any decision. And I will jump down to one of the questions further on about the Energy and Climate Action Committee. I think that's something I feel strongly about looking to start. I think something like that would be a wonderful thing for the city. Because again, it's listening to the people and hearing from the people what they want as well.
I would start as also listening. As an educator, I want to go to the people who are the knowledge holders, so those are the co-sponsors of this event, for example, and collecting what's been going on in the city. One thing that I really want is clear, specific goals to have that our city has. So I would like to work with the mayor and my colleagues and the supporting organizations that are here to put together a planning process to create those goals. Because I feel like it would be helpful as a city to have the goals and we can backwards design, if you're an educator, you know what I'm talking about, you backwards design from those goals. With those goals, you can create objectives, you can create actions, and then everyone in the city can have some buy-in. We can do marketing communication around those goals, we can do education around those goals, from pre-K to end of life. I mean, so that's my thought. Clear goals across the city, go down to actionable objectives and direct tasks everyone can participate in.
Okay, thank you so much. Their question, you'll start this one, Owen. The International Panel on Climate Change calls for 45% emissions reductions by 2030 in order to limit temperature rise below 1.5 degrees Celsius. And municipalities across the globe are taking bold steps to meet aggressive climate goals. This is a two-part question. Do you think that Easthampton should make commitments to measurable emissions reduction goals with associated timelines? And if so, what goals and timelines would you support? And secondly, do you support a municipal commitment to increase building efficiency and power all publicly owned or operated facilities with 100% clean renewable energy by 2025? If not 2035, by what date?
It's a great question. I think the one thing that Lindsay mentioned that I think is really poignant is that, you know, when we set these goals, and I think Bill said this too, as a hybrid, I'm going to kind of mush these things together. We have to both figure out what our goal is and then work backwards from there, and then we also have to figure out how much these goals are going to cost. So while we'd love to make ourselves 100% energy independent, if the city can't afford to do it, then we fail, right? So what goals can we embrace as Easthampton that are realistic and affordable, either via the current ways that we pay for things, through tax revenue or through grants, that we've been really fortunate to get in this last term through the mayor and our great city planner. Overall, I think we need to, you know, reduce our dependency on fossil fuels. One thing that I think the city can certainly look to do more so going forward is to figure out ways to utilize renewable or carbon neutral energies like solar. I know that the new school's going to be designed and have 120, 130 some odd solar panels on them. I think that's a good start. I think that we should talk to mill owners and encourage them to use more solar. I think that we should look to either place solar on our municipal buildings or around our municipal buildings. That not only saves us money, and makes us energy independent, but it also is just a smart thing to do. Again, whether we can reach those goals, that's far beyond my education as a simple healthcare provider here in the Pioneer Valley. And so I think, as Laura kind of mentioned, you know, we need to reach out to the people who know. We have this wonderful city full of both paid and volunteer individuals who are here to provide their expertise to us. Those are the people that we have to reach out to. We already have an energy commission. I think adding to that, to their agenda, some sort of renewable energy mandate, I think that's the way to go. We need the directive from our whole community to figure out how this is going to work.
Thank you. Omar.
Yes, we should, we should set up a day in the future that we should reduce that. When I agree with Councilor Owen, it's not my expertise to say that. I think we should create a committee. The committee should be with experts to guide us to that direction. Let us know what we can do or when we can do. Put a date so we can set some goals with that committee to work in that area. What was the other thing that I was gonna say? Sorry.
That's okay. Well, we'll give you a chance if there's something you want to add.
Okay. Okay.
We'll move on over to,
Okay, Okay, so in doing my research, it's my understanding that basically as part of our green community designation, the city is already committed to reducing municipal energy use by 20% in 5 years. And also doing my research for your excellent questions, I was looking at the community choice energy option, and I believe that if we're committed to community choice energy options and aggregates, that we as a city should have no problem reaching a goal to be 100%, to have our energy provided by 100% renewables. And basically that's because when we come together, the buying power increases, the rates come down, and in the long run, renewables become essentially, it's a program that is not subsidized by the government, it's self-sustaining. And if we've already made the commitment as part of our green community designation, then we hopefully are already on our way to achieving those goals. So also I think a really exciting new development is what's in process is the creation of the municipal light plant, which will help us with municipal internet. But in speaking with people about the options that opens up, it also opens up the ability in the future to create like a microgrid situation in the city. So I think that 100% we need to commit and move swiftly, and we're already on the footing to do that, for years as a green community.
I agree with Erica was saying, all the things that we're recognizing that the city is already doing. Obviously we want to keep doing those things. Can we set a timeline with associated goals? I think we absolutely can. And I also don't think there's anything wrong with setting those goals high. And if we don't achieve them, but we come close, what's that saying about shooting for the moon and you hit the stars, or whatever that one is? But it's that same kind of thing. It's okay to say, let's aim for this, let's try for that. But I think more importantly is to have those goals published somewhere on a regular basis. So maybe a website people can go to. How does the community know what we're doing and how we're doing on that? You're not going to wait until, if it's a 10-year goal, we're not going to wait for 10 years to report on that. It should be reported on a regular basis, so we can make these decisions if we're not catching up with things the way we need to be. To talk to people for ideas, look for more grants, look for doing more things, expanding the things that we're already doing already. What was the other part of this question? Let's see. It's two-parters.
Can you support municipal commitment to increase building?
Building efficiency and power? I do. I think, again, we're looking at the new buildings that we're doing. We have no reason to say no to that when we're building a new building. When we're changing something over, when the city is in charge of that. The question becomes when it's not a city-owned building or when we're renovating an older building. Again, we do have to look at the cost benefit, the cost way out and all of that as well. But I think, again, we go back to those goals. We go back to the goals of having that as an achievable goal. And try.
I'm not going to belabor much of what my colleagues have said, but I will just reiterate, I absolutely think we should have these specific goals. I can't say the year right now because I don't feel given enough information, but I definitely think we should be thinking boldly and having well-known goals throughout the city.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree as well. We should definitely make commitments as a city, as a community, to reduce the emissions and set goals for ourselves. Timelines should be now and going forward. There's some easy wins. We can do recycle bins on the street corners and by the bike paths and everything else, not just trash bins, to kind of push people to recycle and put that bug in their head. If you got a trash can here and a recycle bin here, boom, there goes the plastic bottle. And a municipal commitment to increase building efficiency, absolutely. I know Owen said solar powers, solar panels, we can do something over the parking lot at 50 Payson, over the safety complex parking lot. We see it done at big companies like Mass Mutual and stuff like that. We have parking lots, we have areas that we own that we could put a solar panel farm, if you will, over these areas and really benefit from that and help generate power for our own community and keep it here and lower those rates. So that's what I think we should start looking into. Thank you.
Thank you.
from our question, the next question is really a two-part question. What do you think, concisely please, about the construction of additional oil and gas pipelines or fossil fuel power plants? And the second part of the question is, do you support requiring gas companies to check for and repair all gas leaks, protecting consumers from paying for leak and unaccounted for gas and otherwise reduce methane emissions?
I'm gonna be quick, no like all. I don't think we need more gas pipeline. Well, I think what we have to do is create more solar farms, clean energy resources. That's what we have to do. About if they have to require to fix it, and of course, they should. Like any developer, if you build a building or you build a project or anything you build, you have to be accountable, and they have to be accountable. They have to, if they create something and that is failing, of course they have to pay for it. People shouldn't pay for that. They have to pay for it because they have the money. So, they creating these monsters, and the bank account for them is huge. So who have to pay for them? The person who have the money, and they have the money. They are the developer. If any problem with the structure they're doing it, that they shouldn't build any new ones. Again, I think we should go to the other way, create more solar farms, wind, create energy with clean energy. That's where we have to go. I think we have enough. I can tell that we, as people too, we have to do the transition to move to buy hybrid cars, electric cars, because if we don't start moving too, there's no point for them to change too. So if we keep buying gas, we keep buying those fuels, they're gonna kill building it. So we as a community, we have to start stopping buying that kind of products. And that's how it's gonna change.
That was a long answer.
I'm sorry.
I'll be short.
Could you look at us when you speak instead of at him?
Sure,
Oh, yes.
yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Move back.
Could you look at us when you ask the question so we can,
Okay,
because
fine.
they already know what the question is.
Thank you, and if anyone doesn't hear anything, please don't hesitate. We'll
Yes.
all type up, okay, but thank you for bringing that.
So my two short answers, no more pipelines, no more fossil fuel infrastructure, it's a wasted investment. And in general, yes, I'm always for more consumer protections. There's no reason why we shouldn't have more of a say and more protection. The profits are always growing for these companies, and that's because we're paying, so it's time for that to end.
Yeah, and I would say, what do I think about construction of additional oil and pipeline, fossil fuel, et cetera? Horrible. Honestly, I go back to my statement about capitalism. They're out there and, these things aren't just bringing us goods and products that are hurting our environment. They're getting them in ways that hurt the environment even more. And they're destroying our open lands. They're affecting animals. They're ruining those spaces that we can go to get solitude and peace in this world. And they're putting these pipelines through them. So there's a few different reasons why I just don't agree with it. And again, but we're the ones that are asking for it. So it's out of capitalism. The more we grow that, we're growing capitalism. We all have to ask ourselves, what part are we playing in that? And do I support gas companies for repair? Again, yes. They're making money off of us. We're buying their product from them. But they're making money, and they need to maintain this in a very safe way. It's absolutely their responsibility. So I absolutely agree that they should be looking at these lines, preventing the terrible explosions that we've seen. There's been loss of lives in people's homes, because of these gas lines that aren't being well maintained. I think it's a shame, and I think they really should be taking care of these things and paying for it.
With my colleagues, that's going backwards to invest in any kind of fossil fuels. We should be investing in renewable energy. I think that's going forward. in terms of the leaks, I thank you for asking that question, because then I researched about the leaks and found out there's 17 unrepaired leaks in Easthampton, one of which is at 12 Briggs, which is right near Maple Street School. It's a great level 2 leak. There's also one at 74 Mount Tom Avenue, which is right across the street from my mother. Level 2 leak, and she happens to be allergic to natural gas, so that was interesting. So, yeah, so consumer protection, they should be fixing the leaks.
Thank you. The oil and gas lines, absolutely, I think we should end there. One of the biggest things, that's the reason we have plastic bags, right? So plastic bags are from the refinement process of our fossil fuels, and it's the byproduct, and this was what they created. So if we can shut that down, that'll help solve some of this other problems that we've spiraled into where we are today. So I think shutting it down is obviously the solution, and gaining and educating the community to go to sustainable solar energy and wind power, whatever it is that gets us away from those fossil fuels. And then hopefully, in turn, protecting the environment from plastic bags and all this single-use plastic. And then, repairing gas leaks, it's a no-brainer. Why would we not want to repair them? You said it earlier, people's lives are at stake, things blow up, we see it in the news left and right, houses, communities, and everything, neighborhoods gone away because of a gas leak that went neglected. I don't think that there's any question. I think that everything should be repaired. That's it, thanks.
You're going to be very proud of me. So in terms of question number one, what we'd love to see tomorrow is to snap our fingers and everywhere we look is a solar, well, without deforestation. We'd love to see solar fields, we'd love to see wind, we'd love to see all sorts of renewable energies. But the reality right now is that the paradigm we live in, and I appreciate the word Laura used earlier, paradigm shift is what we're looking for, is that while we want to completely eliminate our reliance on fossil fuels, the reality is right now we do still use fossil fuels. So if there is infrastructure change that needs to occur, we need to severely limit how that can happen. And I do not support, however, that being said, I do not support the development of new pipelines. Additionally, and this will be really short, regards to gas leaks, the answer is yes. And thank you, that's some really interesting information. I'll grab that for you.
And in regard to that, part of the reason why that part of the question was asked is because a number of communities have marked out all the gas leaks. Utilities are required to report them, including our utility. And so we are going, this week is a week of action. I don't know if you've noticed in the media and all the things. So we had thought at times that Easthampton perhaps look to this, and so this Sunday we want to invite people at 2 o'clock. We'll be either at or across the street from One Cottage, because One Cottage is on the list.
Is a level 2.
One Cottage is on the list there too. And we are going to, there's a report that's been issued about the reporting of gas leaks. We'll take an opportunity to mark out some, starting with one at One Cottage. So we invite everyone to come. 2 o'clock this Sunday the 29th.
By mark out, you mean put a big sign that says.
Well,
gas
there are
leak?
signs, yeah, I've seen different communities have used different, little flags or something like that, not gigantic things.
That would be good though.
But
Gas leak here.
I do want to check, we have completed an hour of our program. How are people doing? Okay, are the questions okay so far? Okay.
Well, we want to, sorry, I have one or two questions, but I think it would be really helpful, and maybe I just missed this, if we could have
Bless
seen
you.
all 11 questions in advance, so they're not covered. I'm sitting here wondering if we could have something targeted,
Yes.
but like, if we knew what they, what was
That's
coming.
a good point. And what we will do, if you give us the emails, your email address, we will forward those questions out to you too.
I'm talking about while I'm listening now, so
Yeah, I
I
got it,
know whether I
sorry.
should be trying to scribble down something that I think is major,
Okay.
hasn't been mentioned, or if it's question 10 or 11.
Yes, I got you.
That's all.
Okay, that's
I mean, there could be,
that point.
but I don't want to take the time.
That point's
Yeah.
fine.
There are some copies of the questions on
Yeah,
the.
we made some, unfortunately, not nearly enough with us, so.
These are people
But the point was well taken, we could have gotten it.
Oh,
Okay, so I believe we're with you, Erica.
There are 5.
Right, okay, and we're looking at, I think this has been mentioned already by some folks. Would you support Easthampton implementing an Energy and Climate Action Committee, whose task would be to recommend climate mitigation goals and target dates for meeting these goals?
Shortest answer, yes.
Could you look at, excuse me, could you look out here when you read the question?
Sorry.
Instead of, we already know the question.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
I didn't.
Because I can't figure out what you're saying.
Okay,
if I can
I'm
hear
actually
you.
I'm gonna repeat that one, because I was
Yeah.
schooled on that the first time and I totally missed it. So let me read it out to folks. Would you support Easthampton implementing an energy and climate action committee whose task would be to recommend climate mitigation goals and target dates for meeting those goals?
Just say yes or no so we can get through all the questions.
And thank you.
So I said yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I would say yes, because I think that as much as we can look to this group of people or whoever's elected to make those changes also have to come from here.
Yes.
So we need people on a committee to advise the people who are sitting in these chairs. So yes, yes, yes.
Yes. Unless, just one caveat, I don't know exactly what the current energy committee does, so if their role could be expanded, but this, either the current, a new committee or their role expanded to include climate mitigation.
Yes, I'm in support of it as well.
And yes, that would be my comment, is we do have an energy advisory committee, and one of the powers of being a locally elected official is that we can expand their charge, exactly, through rules. I would also note too, for anyone who's sitting here today, thank you, Lindsay, for hosting the committee fair, that there are 2 current vacancies on the Energy Advisory Committee. So I encourage all of you who are interested in this type of thing to apply. And that was it, right? We just had to answer that question? Okay, that's it.
Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
You want to hear it?
Yes.
The city has numerous committees, and all the committees are doing a great job. And we have to add this committee. So my answer is yes. And this committee is going to do as great as the other committees because we have a really good, great committees in Easthampton.
Thank you. The next question is actually a 3-part question.
Oh.
But it's
Yeah,
about,
1 part, 3 part.
but it follows from this last one because it's about public engagement and how do you get community together. So we chose 3 specific areas about community engagement. So question 1 would be, what steps would you take to overcome the barriers to keep low to moderate income residents from participating in insulation and weatherization programs? So that's overcoming barriers. Secondly, do you support mandatory recycling for all residents and businesses? And thirdly, would you support water-saving initiatives, including installation of low-flow and water-efficient plumbing fixtures in public buildings, outdoor watering restrictions, and rate incentives for reduced water usage in Easthampton?
All right. So the steps to take to overcome the barriers for low and moderate income residents, a lot of these programs we have, a lot of it is a problem of outreach. You know, you're trying to reach out to a population who their only interaction with energy people may not have been a pleasant one. You're talking about people who are getting shut-off notices, people who are struggling to make ends meet, and now they're looking to make their homes better. So what we need to do is be able to have more outreach for people, more education for people, so that they know who they can reach out to and what their program is all about. Another barrier we have is when people come in to do a lot of these repairs on houses, like they may be focused on one area, like an energy repair, but if they find a safety issue, the safety issue has to be fixed first before they can get the energy repair done. So what we need to do is also link them to other available resources to help people with those sorts of things too, so they can make their home both safe and energy efficient. Supporting a mandatory recycling for all residents and businesses. So my initial pass is to say, of course, yes. Of course, yes, I say yes. But my bigger question is, what happens to the things that we're recycling? So even if we say right now, we're passing a law and right now everyone has to recycle everything, it's really great, it's off my doorstep. It's really great, I feel good for doing that. But what's happening to those bottles and those cans and that glass and that plastic that's going out there? You know, we have a real problem in our country. This is bigger than the city of Easthampton. We have a real problem. Other countries aren't taking our garbage anymore. So we can recycle all this stuff and, like I said, get it off my doorstep, feel good about what I just did. But the bigger question we need to examine is what's happening to our recycling when it leaves the door. So that's why that's a funny question for me. You know, my knee-jerk reaction is yes, let's recycle. But my other question, my answer would really be I need to do some research before I actually mandate that. Because are we wasting resources doing something that's going to end up in the dump anyways? And supporting water-saving initiatives, I do, the water-saving initiatives. it's a limited resource. You know, water's not something we can really, we can recycle it in some ways, but that again takes energy. You know, but we need to be really careful about what we do with our water. I think looking at new buildings, new construction, and requiring those things to happen. I mean, water fountains, I don't know if you go to the gym and you can go to the bubbler now and fill up your water container there. You know, that promotes people not using single-use water bottles. You know, I don't know what happened to our culture that all of a sudden we have these everywhere. You know what I mean? So how do we promote that? And we can do that by ways like this. Lawns, we don't need lawns. You know, we can plant things that can grow. You know, we live in the Pioneer Valley, a place that we're like really in touch with our farm, you know, our farms and how to grow things that look beautiful. You know, embrace your dandelions, folks. We don't need to water them.
Eat them.
Eat them, there you go. I'll put it on the menu. Okay.
Well, you skipped right to the sub-questions, but the larger question here was how will you inspire public engagement and work collaboratively with Easthampton residents to achieve our climate and environmental goals? So this goes back to the shared goals of the city. This is something I would love to get together and work with the school committee on, because I feel that the climate change can be integrated into the curriculum from pre-K to 12. There's no reason that it affects economics, it affects environment, it affects every level of living. So I think that that should be integrated into our curriculum pre-K through 12. Another thing is overcoming barriers to low to moderate income residents. A lot of those residents we're talking about are renters. So what kind of pressure are we putting on landlords to take responsibility to make their houses more efficient? So I would be interested in looking at that. I don't know what, as a city we have, but pressuring the state to put codes in that requires landlords to make their homes more efficient. Also filling the gap with grants, because even though they're low cost to do the mass saves, there is still a cost. And if you're living on a budget to budget, you need help filling the gap with that cost. The mandatory recycling. Okay, our city doesn't pick up the recycling, we pay for that, and as many of you know, USA Recycling just pretty much monopolized the garbage and recycling pickup and raised the prices quickly. So, and this is just a Facebook discussion about this. Many of us are now just driving our recycling to Northampton, or the pedal people are here now. But if we have mandatory recycling, that there's gonna be a cost because we need to help people recycle. Well, how are they gonna recycle? We don't have a city pickup. So I'd be interested at the municipal level looking at ways to facilitate people recycling. It's actually becoming harder because it's more expensive to have people pick it up. The water saving initiatives, yes, I support water saving initiatives, same reason my colleagues gave. And there's something I was reading, I think it was in the MVP, full expression of lawn. I love that. Cutting paths and having a full expression of lawn. And I actually took a picture of it and texted it to my mom, because my mom has been full expressing her lawn for many years with paths, and she finally legitimized her recycling, but I mean her lawn. But we have also HOAs in our community, planned communities. They're putting pesticides in, they're watering a lot. So what kind of things are we doing as a city to disincentivize that kind of green lawns across these housing HOAs? So these are kind of things, when I look at something like the recycling, the water saving, I'm a systems thinker, so I'm like, how can we get there?
Public engagement, here we are, right? So this is what it's about, is getting involved with the community. I think it's important. Owen and I collaborated and did a cleanup maybe like a month ago, around Nashawanek Pond, where we got some residents and went around the city, and I brought my 5-year-old son, and I think education is part of it too. Having our youth in our schools being a part of some of these events and things that we do, because that's the future community, and that's who we really want to support and do it for. When it comes to low and moderate income residents and participating in some of the programs, I think we can look at, the landlord option was a great point. Looking at CPA funding, and seeing if there's anything out there or grants available to help low-income residents, because I know that's part of what they look into and some of the areas of that designation for the funding. Do you support mandatory recycling for residents and businesses? To Lindsay's point, I think residences is really hard because there's multiple vendors that collect our trash and recycling. I think as a municipality, we can cater to that, and I think with the businesses, we can put some things in place to make it mandatory, or at least a good portion of it back on the business. Do you support water saving initiatives? Absolutely. We have pride in our water. We have some of the best water in the country. We've seen it time and time again, and we want to protect it. We want to make sure that, as Nicole was saying, with Barnes Aquifer and some of the contaminants that have existed in our region, in reality, it's concerning. So we want to make sure we protect it and that we keep it as long as we can. Thanks.
The best water in the country.
Oh, yeah.
Inspiring public engagement. Bill mentioned it. I think a bunch of us participated in a great cleanup that was facilitated by Laudable Productions and Mill Pond Live recently with the Connecticut River Conservatory. I think we need to keep doing things like that as a community. Not only will it make our community clean, it also connects people with each other, which I think ultimately is our goal as a community. We have a once-a-year cleanup. I think we should be doing more mini cleanups during the year. I think Lindsay made a great point that this should be integrated into our school curriculum. I also think that while it won't reach everyone, I think I may have to take it upon myself to learn how to use Facebook. And broadcast the signal far and wide to encourage people to not only get out there and help clean up our city and reduce emissions, but also to get involved and try to organize some of these things. In regards to steps to overcome barriers for our low to moderate income residents, I forget who made a great point that unfortunately a lot of them are renters. Although fortunately MassSave does offer some great programs. Where the threshold for a single person household is $35,000, it goes up by $11K per there. And some of these things are free, but I do agree that there is still cost associated. So we have to look at to see what we could do as a municipality to foster and to add extra support to figure out ways to fund those initiatives. Mandatory recycling. So as Laura said, first off in my head is yes. However, to go back to question A regarding low-income people, unfortunately, there's a marginalizing effect there. If we tell everybody that they have to recycle, well, some people just can't afford that. And unfortunately, the current paradigm we've been using that word a lot today, paradigm, but I'll go back to that. The paradigm we live in right now is that all of the trash pickup is privatized. So a couple things I want to do is, if we are going to have better opportunities for recycling, then I really feel that the municipality has to figure out how to take that upon themselves. And I also think with these crazy trash, these companies are making it. You talk about capitalism. They're making money off of our waste. And maybe the whole thing is a secret plan to get us to actually have less waste. But I don't think it is. But it's insane. And so, can the city take steps to either A, offer municipal pickup, which I know would be a big expense to the city, so maybe that's not the option, or B, are there ways to kind of create prioritization in terms of contracts that automatically come in with a certain price for residents? But yes, obviously I support recycling. I agree with what Laura said, that at the end of the day, do we really want, what's all this trash that we're generating? Do we want to be throwing all that out? So we have to look at ourselves too, what that is about. And then in terms of water saving, I'll say one thing that campaigning has done with me is my lawn is really freely expressing itself right now. But we have the best water in the country, and we're also seeing issues coming up with having to rebuild our water and our sewer infrastructure, as well as storm runoff prices. So just for the sake of saving money, we should be looking to water saving initiatives. But from the perspective of the fact that we need to save our aquifer, which is right below us right now, we need to preserve the precious resource of water. So absolutely, I want to preserve it. Yeah, man.
The overcome the barrier for the low and moderate income. I think one of the hardest thing is the communication, the information, and as a municipality, as we have to provide them more information to them. There is grants out there for them to apply. As a municipality, we can create committees to them to come. That way they can come to the committee and ask questions, and that way we can help them. Definitely is education. We have to educate the community that we have to help that particular group of people. The mandatory recycling, I agree with what you guys, what you're saying is true. It's really hard to us, not just to see how they're gonna do it, it's who's gonna implement it. Who's gonna implement the ordinance. I think it's easier for us because we don't have any city trash company to pick up the trash. It's easier for us to make an ordinance to obligate those companies that are coming to our city to do recycling. That way, we are sure that someone is recycling. And again, the best way to make everybody aware that they have to recycle is to teach those kids since they're in kindergarten. If we don't teach them and we wait to high school or we wait till they get older, it's gonna be tough. So at the end of the day, everything has to be education. And we have to from point zero, from the they're little child. About water saving initiative, 100%. We have to do it, we have to do it now. That's a resource there. If we don't protect, in the future we're gonna need it. And the worst is gonna be in the water. So we need to save it now. I'm gonna say it again. I'm gonna be repetitive with that. Education, at home, we have to do it. I have 3 girls. And instead of for them to take a shower for 30 minutes with warm water, we have to explain that they have to take it for 5 minutes. And then explain the reason why. Is sometimes we say it's about the money. True, but it's about saving the planet too. You know, we have to save the planet and we have to teach that at home. If we don't do it at home, who's gonna do it? So we have to do it and we have to do it now.
Because I had a short answer to the last question, I'm gonna take a little longer this time. Public engagement. So the first thing in terms of public engagement is I love to talk to people about what my family has done, just in incremental steps, little decisions we've made along the way. For instance, so our house is 119 years old this year, and over the years, through programs like the Community Development Block Grant and the Mass Solar Loan Programs, which are available to low-income families, we've been able to change out we've got vinyl replacement windows, which replace the original single glass wood sash windows that when winter was here, it was coming straight through our window year after year after year. We went from having to fill the oil tank 3 times in a winter to once a year, literally, just from switching out a bad roof and bad windows, sealing drafts. We also have switched over, much to the chagrin of my family in the beginning, to smaller appliances. We're a family of 4. We have a refrigerator that looks like it belongs in an Airbnb. But we eat fresh food. We're no longer throwing out food that is wasted. We don't eat a whole lot of processed foods. We have a healthier diet and we're healthier people for it. And we're using a lot less energy. And it's completely possible. And the only reason I got that idea is because I was traveling to Germany for work quite a lot and staying in Berlin and realizing that all of my friends had teeny tiny refrigerators. And I'd come home to this monstrosity full of food I didn't even know when I was gonna have time to eat. And I just eventually one day said, forget it, we're getting rid of it. And it works, and we've had it for 10 years now. And then another area, and also ties into the water, is I am a gardener, and I'm an avid gardener. It's one of the ways that I have had the opportunity to speak with my neighbors is while I'm out in my garden, somebody just stops and talks, and it's the best thing ever. I switched over years ago to using purely rainwater catchment and irrigation, so my front garden is connected and it only gets watered when we have rainwater in the catchment. If it can't grow in a season here, it doesn't grow in my yard. We support black raspberries, we have a pear tree, we have golden raspberries, and we grow vegetables, and it's all rainwater. My water bill went down and my family budget went up. Solar panels were huge. In this last year, we installed solar panels, and I can say that personally, 1 year later, we have not paid an electric bill since April, and that was with running air conditioners. Being a little more generous with the air conditioners this first year as a reward to my family too. We now have $500 that is banked and ready to face the winter. We don't have heat on the second floor in our house. Our house is 120, 119 years old. So we use room heaters and electric blankets in our rooms at night, and hopefully what we just created over the summertime will carry us through the winter. Like I said, those were incremental steps. So as Laura mentioned, a lot of those improvements early on we wanted to make. We had, basically in 2010 when I bought my family's home from other family members, we were dead in the middle of the process of the community development block grant. That took me 2 years of exhausted advocacy for my family. Actually, the application began under my uncle's name. He was elderly, he was living at home alone, and I was taking care of him while he had pancreatic cancer. He survived for 4 years with home-based care with pancreatic cancer. And every winter it got colder and heat got more expensive. So I pushed and I pushed and I pushed. By the time we actually got the grant, he had passed. But I took over ownership of the house and pushed through with all the repairs. And that allowed me to later on, now 7 years, 8 years later, apply for the Mass Solar loan because I didn't have a 115-year-old slate roof failing on my roof anymore. I had a new roof which could then take the solar. So now we're one step closer to being energy independent as a family. Our bills have come down, but that took advocacy on my part for my family. We need advocates. Committees are great and having resources there are great, but you actually really need somebody who is going to push your application along. If they're waiting for some piece of paper to come from some office you have no control over, you have to have somebody calling and asking for it every day, every week until you get it. So one way I would like to help remove that barriers would be to be a contact, to be somebody who's gone through that process personally, who understands how difficult it is to gather up a stack of paperwork like this to prove that you don't have the money to do the repairs you need and make your home safe for your family. Again, and with the water, I'd like to also just use the example of by partnering up with neighbors in my community. When Parsons Village was built, the original plans called for a permeable surface for their parking lot. Now this is an affordable housing complex. Not everybody that lives in affordable housing can afford a brand new car. Cars leak oil, cars leak brake fluid, cars leak antifreeze. As neighbors, we raised concern and we advocated for the aquifer sitting beneath there. There is no permeable parking lot there now. It was a great design for another location, but it was a horrible design sitting on top of our recharge zone. So again, I would like to continue to be an advocate, and I would like to be an advocate that comes from a place of understanding. I understand what it's like to grow up in a low-income family and have to work really hard to just put your concerns out there and be listened to. And I would hope that people will feel comfortable coming and talking to me and understanding that I'm going to try to connect them to resources that are out there, knowing just how difficult they are to secure, but that I would be standing there with them along the way.
Thank you. Well, you did make up for the vote.
I can't give Owen all of the time.
Hey, Owen, I mean.
Lindsay, we're back to you, and now we're going to look at transportation, because according to the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, emissions from transportation are responsible for 31.8% of our greenhouse gas emissions in the Pioneer Valley. So the question is, how can the city of Easthampton tackle pollution and greenhouse gas emissions from transportation, specifically in these three respects? One, increasing the use of electric vehicles and providing electric vehicle charging stations. Two, would you advocate as city councilor for expansion of public transportation? I should say we'll have an additional question that one of the, two questions that will be asked by someone who's here on that very question. And three, what specific infrastructure improvements would you recommend to make this a more walkable and bikeable city? Back to you.
Thank you. So yes, I do support the increasing the use of electric vehicles. We just bought one in our family this year, and unfortunately, there's not that many places to charge in the area. Even in Northampton, they're usually taken, so, and in Easthampton, there's nowhere.
Right out there.
Right out there, right out here. All right, so when I come here, hike and charge. Okay, so we need, if we're gonna be promoting the use of electric vehicles, we need to be promoting the use of places that you can charge the vehicles. But there's a great state program, Go Green initiative, and that's where I bought it through. So letting people know about this initiative, which gives you a lot of, you get rebates back from the car dealership and also mass rebate back and a federal rebate back. So I got $7,500 in tax rebates from buying an electric vehicle, as well as $5,000 back from the car dealership.
Didn't the federal just end?
Huh?
I think the federal ends at the end of 2019.
Yeah, probably, I think it does.
That's also, you're talking about affordable the whole way, you're assuming new cars. Sorry.
No, you're right, you're right. They're new cars. I'm also working, I heard what Nicole was saying earlier, our mayor, about transitioning our fleet of cars and vehicles in the city to hybrid. So I would work with the city and obviously support any initiative to be transitioning in that direction. Second one was expansion. I'm a big supporter of public transportation. When I worked at HEC, it was great that I could walk to Clark and take the bus there. But coming from a city, and Louise and I have talked about this a lot, that it's really lacking our public transportation in this area, and that would be a great, and I think people here have the appetite to use it if it gets you somewhere in a timely fashion. It's, I kind of yearn for those old trolley days with the trolley maps everywhere. I'm not sure how efficient they were, but so do anything I could to support the expansion of public transportation. In terms of becoming a walkable and bikeable city, my first house party was about this, and I was actually really impressed with the work the city planning department has already been doing to really look into that on a deep level. One of the things I'm excited about and I'll continue to support is access to the bike trail. So bikeways throughout, or it would be great if anywhere you were in Easthampton, there was an easy way to access the bike trail from your house, so that way you have a artery running through the city. Kids can get to school, you can get from one town to another, so I would be supporting that. I've talked to people out in our outer reaches, like on Loudville, and if you live on Loudville or roads like that, you can't walk anywhere in a safe way. Even if you just wanted to walk into a neighborhood to walk around, if you wanted to go to one of the Ashley Circle or one of the other neighborhoods that go off of that, there's not a safe way to get there. So unfortunately, kids living in that area and adults don't have a safe passage. So that's something I would look into exploring, and I think making our city more walkable and bikeable is a shared concern of residents and something we can work together on.
Thank you. Do I support increasing electric vehicles and charging stations? Absolutely. I know we just approved charging stations to be installed at City Hall and in the mill, behind the mills, and so I think that's a good step, and we should continue to look at options and opportunities to get some grants to expand on that and promote it as a community. As a city councilor, how do you advocate for expansion of public transportation? I think it's obviously a benefit for everybody, including the folks, not only is it environmentally friendly, it's the folks that can't afford to buy a car, get them from point A to point B. I think we need to expand on the stops in town. I know they cut some a few years back, throughout the community. There used to be one at a post office and one at the end of Industrial Drive and everything else, and they consolidated it all into one. So, you know, now you have to walk a half a mile to get to where you could have gotten dropped off at. So we really need to just look, I think, at expanding the locations that the buses actually stop at, and we have more points of interest within our community that are appealing to folks as well. What specific infrastructure improvements would you recommend to make it a walkable and a bikeable city? I think, you know, the Safe Street initiatives is a huge thing that, you know, we have bike paths and are supporting it in the lane on Cottage Street and Union Streets to come. I think, you know, Lindsay hit it on the head too, taking the planes and making those connections that the Manhattan Rail Trail is looking into at the end of Brook Street or Plain Street, and connecting them so that kids can safely get to school, walking and biking, and that would help save with buses and everything else, as well as getting kids in shape, right? So there's a lot of benefits to it, and I think we can really look into that. And I know the Manhattan Rail Trail has a lot of great ideas that we need to support. Thank you.
Yeah, the rail trail is one of the things that makes the city very special. So do I support the use of electric vehicles and provide EV charging stations? Absolutely. As Bill just mentioned, we fortunately voted to install some through the acquisition of some great grants at 50 Pace and then by the Mills. I think the problem for an individual choosing to purchase these vehicles is twofold. One is the availability of charging stations. So if you're thinking of getting one and you can't charge your car anywhere where you live, well, that's a problem, and why would you consider buying one? And two is the cost. And so thank you, Lindsay, for sharing some of those cost-saving measures and tax credits for these. But I think we all need to advocate to our lawmakers to provide us with more programs like that. So absolutely, I think we need to go green. We need to reduce our gas emissions in our vehicles. I'm trying to keep the word count low. As a city councilor, would you advocate for the expansion of public transportation? 100%. This is one of those places where, as a local legislature, you actually don't have too much power, but where we do have power is the ability to make connections and to create a network of people who can do these things. So reaching out to our state rep Dan Carey and other people on Beacon Hill who we form relationships with, there's the power there to kind of leverage those relationships for the good of our community. So yes, we should be expanding our public transportation. I think it's a shame with what's happening right now in our city that we don't have better busing options for people to get to and from the city without having to own a vehicle. I also think, a thought I had last time was, we have two big problems in the city. One is the lack of public transportation, the other is parking issues, right? Well, there's parking in places in the city, but the places that you might want to park aren't the places you want to necessarily be. So I did think it would be really interesting, you mentioned a trolley, you know, some sort of green or hybrid powered or battery powered shuttle that operates during peak times in the city and starts at the Mills and goes down Pleasant Street to Main Street and from there to Union Street up Cottage, and it does a loop. And you could park anywhere you want and you get picked up at reliable intervals. I just think it would be an interesting thing for the city to explore, and I've looked into these and they're not super expensive. It's just something to think about. What was the last question? Walkable and bikeable city. Yeah, again, the Manhattan Rail Trail is one of the things that makes our city so special. It's one of our precious resources, and I really appreciate the work that the planning department is doing to expand the bike path, to create new rail trail spurs, and with the advent of complete streets, I think that's great. We do need to find ways to continue to expand that and to make the bike path accessible for everybody. And also, as a runner and a cyclist, not as much right now while I'm campaigning, but I aspire to be, you know, running on Loudville Road and living on Florence Road, like, there's not a lot of room there to make it safe for pedestrians and cyclists, so we have to think about that. So, thank you.
Oh, and I thought you were running for re-election there.
I like Steve. Omar.
I have to say, they always say everything what I'm gonna say. So, first, electric cars, 100%. I usually have one electric car. I have a hybrid car, and it's really important to educate people to buy electric cars. Like Lindsay said, is programs there to help with the taxes. When you do the return tax, they're going to give you some incentive for buying those cars. So it's really good, and plus it's going to help the environment. The EV chargers, 100%, we need EV chargers. And I'm happy that was part of the council of they say yes to apply for those grants. Since they want them being elected, I was talking to the mayor Nicole and pushing as much as I can to get those charges in our city. As a former owner of an electric car, I was always telling the administration that we needed, because every time as a person having those cars, I was looking for those chargers. Every time that I was going to eat out or something, I was thinking about where I can charge my car. And for those days that we have the chaos in Cottage Street, you know how many electric cars I saw? And I was hoping that we have those chargers for those people that are coming to our city. It's a lot of people with those cars now, and definitely we need it in our city. I'm so happy that we're gonna have a few, but I think those a few that we're gonna have, they are not enough. I think we need more. And as a part of the government, we have to keep working to get more. What was the other part of the question? About public transportation, I agree with Councilor Lynch. We need more bus stop in our city. That way probably we're gonna increase the use of those transportation. People don't use it most of the time because the bus stops are really far away. Especially to use it in winter is not really comfortable. So I agree with Councilor Owen. That he said is as a local government, we don't have that power to make those decisions. But being at the council, we made those connections and at the state level to start working with that, because definitely we need it. For the walking and bike in our city, I think the city planners are doing great. Our city is really friendly with walk and bike. I think what we have to do is be more involved with the little kids, with the school department, to create like bike to school, walk to school, that kind of events, walk to work, bike to work, and create not just once a year. We think we should do that 5-10 times a year. So to create a culture that just instead of using cars all the time, walk, bike. That's what we have to do.
Yeah, I'll make it short. I support the use of electric vehicles in the charging stations. I'd love to see more of them. I know I was looking at the plans for the River Valley Co-op, and they have these solar arrays for parking spots, but I would really love to see them add some charging stations. To me, it just seems like a no-brainer that people who are kind of coming from the Northampton area as an overflow to that building, it would be another great location, among others. In terms of expansion of public transportation, I think this is very important. And I know one thing we can do is just, somebody mentioned is finding allies and creating allies who can speak to the higher ups for us. We need Congress to press this president and the next president to not only save the funding that we have that's going to transportation infrastructure, but to increase it. I think it's just a fun slogan to think of. Wherever public transit goes, communities grow. So why not? But we need to have loud voices who can advocate for that for us. What can we specifically do in the city to make it more walkable and bikeable? First of all, we've had a lot of great projects going on to fix sidewalks, but there's still a number of sidewalks that are very dangerous for people who are not fully able in our community. We could really use some resurfacing, some releveling, repairs. We need more lights. It can be really scary to walk from Mill Pond Live to my house on Parsons Street after all the festivities are done. Aside from all of the traffic, there's not lights the whole way in certain areas. And you try walking by One Ferry Street at night with no lights. It's like a Ghost Hunters episode.
Where there's the on-street lamps on one side of the road and the path that you can walk on.
Yep.
Because there's only a sidewalk on one side of the road, not both, that's on the opposite side.
And then there's neighborhoods throughout the city that I think we really just have to revisit and look and see how safe and well lit are they. I'm really happy to see what's happening with the labeling of the bike lanes, and I think expanding this share the road idea and really having people get out there. I'd love to see in our community some of these critical mass rides that I've seen in other cities, where once a month a group, like a large group of bicyclists, gets out and they move through the city as a mob, and they make themselves known, and vehicles have they can't turn their heads, and they just have to learn to live with it. It's a great event. It's intergenerational. I've seen people on all sorts of bikes do it. It's just a great way to get people engaged and involved. And just one last piece on the bike path is, if we want to make that a truly sustainable choice of alternative transportation, it needs to be cleared in the winter time, and more lights have to be added to that. But right now, it's a jewel for 3 seasons out of the year. So I would really like to see what we could do on the municipal level to ensure that that is cleared from start to finish in the winter months.
So supporting the use of electrical vehicles and charging stations, absolutely. I think what we as city councilors could do is think about, new buildings. Is there a requirement of a building of a particular size to put them in? Because we really do need to make more charging stations to allow more people to make that decision to go with an electric car. I myself thought about it, but I had those same questions of, if I get to work, what if the charging stations are filled? I do have to kind of come home at one point. So we have to answer those questions a lot. It's sort of like a rolling ball that we have to start happening. So maybe when we're looking at these school buildings that we're going to do something with, perhaps part of that request for proposal involves putting the charging stations in there. And as far as the city moving towards electric vehicles, putting it on the plan is an absolute definite. It has to be there. And again, I say we have to take a bit of a leap. The return we get from these vehicles is huge. So is there some way we can find the funds to make that happen sooner than later? Advocating for public transportation, absolutely. I think I would actually go right to the source and ask, why those changes were made in the first place. What's their criteria for cutting down on the stops that we had in this city? Is there anything we can do about that? Is it reaching out to the public and letting people know, increasing usage? I too thought of having, especially those times that we're busy, is there some sort of bus system or trolley system that we can utilize during those busy times to cut down? It also ties into the next question about bike safety. If we can cut down on traffic by having trolleys of some kind or buses or something, does that not make it safer for people to walk around and to use their bikes? So that's something we could think about. Making the city more walkable and a bikeable city, I think part of that is we get to look to our great arts community for that. If we want to make the city more walkable, we have the infrastructure things that you're talking about, and you had some great points about lighting, absolutely true. But we have to give people a reason to do it too. We need people that have a reason to want to walk around the city of Easthampton. And I believe a lot of that is because we're known for an arts community. Think about the Bear Fest, how much walking did you see then? If we really support our arts community as well and put things in downtown that make this a more walkable city as far as an enjoyable city, I think that'd be something that would benefit us. And then I can't read, the other thing I was gonna say, I can't read my writing. The other thing is inner city housing, being able to look at how can we put some housing in downtown so people are more living in downtown. I can live here, I can walk to a store, I can walk to a restaurant, I'm not gonna be driving so much. How can we make the city more comfortably so, putting more housing inside?
Thank you. There's a lot of interest in transportation, and as I mentioned before, there are a couple of follow-up questions that we will get to. But I do want to check in and see how people are doing. We have prepared 4 more questions, 2 of which we can kind of treat in a lightning round type of thing, and really kind of get to the nub of them. Are people okay? Because to be honest, we'll be shooting past 9 o'clock.
It's all being time. It's 8:45. I mean,
Okay.
everybody's answered every question. You literally should have a stopwatch. It's just almost.
Okay.
We're getting frustrated.
Okay. There are 2, we'll do 2 questions at once in the lightning round. I'm going to start with the one about, and this has been mentioned before, community choice energy and community choice aggregation, which essentially would be the city would serve as a bulk purchasing agent. We negotiate between our electrical supply on behalf of its residents.
Right, how are we just this?
Yes.
On that question, I think,
Almost everyone is mentioned.
right,
Okay.
so that's,
Second lightning round. Restricting single-use products. We talked a little bit about bags. We also added a question about water filling stations, which I think some of you had also mentioned, but on the restriction of single-use items like bags, like straws, those things. Should the city be restricting those or not?
Yes.
And when we,
Yes.
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 Sure.
anyone?
Bags, absolutely, yes.
Okay.
I'd also add a backpacks.
Anyone else want to add anything to that? Okay.
I just want to say, do you know, in Connecticut, you can return your plastic bottles for 5 cents. I would like to see that in Massachusetts too. Maybe we can start in the city somehow, I don't know. But
Expanding the deposit.
expanding deposits, I don't know how
Well,
we do it.
And
in
the
these
Well, if you really want to go there,
Nip
nip bottles.
Yeah,
Yes,
nip
exactly.
bottles.
Yeah, we got it.
We were cleaning up by the rail trail. It's like nip bottles.
Now, the remaining two questions, we'll try our best to kind of keep them lightning, but one of them deals with building code. And there's an important role for building code. The question is, what role should the city play to ensure that future residential and commercial development and renovation are increasingly energy efficient and minimize greenhouse gas emissions? So, for example, would you support updating the Massachusetts stretch code to a net zero standard, okay, which would require new buildings in most cities and towns to generate as much energy as they use? Do you think the city of Easthampton should adopt zoning regulations that would control the amount of greenhouse gas a project can produce, including emissions associated with traffic, energy consumption, water usage, and construction activities? Would you support a requirement for EV charging infrastructure in new construction, meaning that you build it into the construction? EV charging, and would you support a requirement for rooftop solar on new construction? I know that's a whole bunch of stuff.
But those two gonna have to be attached.
Okay,
Building the EV with the solar.
okay. Bill, let's start with you if you want to take a crack at any or all of those.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take a crack at all of them. I think they're all, they all make sense and they all should be supported. Obviously, I think there's a lot of discussions that need to be had with creating codes and everything else. You want to make sure that we do the right thing for the person building it, the people that are going to be using it, and the businesses that are going to be running it. But yeah, absolutely, it should. If you can have a facility generate its own power, that's a win. And EV charging station infrastructure within new constructions, you know, obviously that is answered, I think, in the previous questions. And rooftop solar on new construction, if the rooftop or covering the parking lots, you know, some form of solar involved in the construction is a great opportunity, and I would definitely support that.
Okay, yeah, net zero stretch code. I mean, I think it's a great idea. Laura mentioned earlier, it's easier to enforce on the municipal side. We need to think about the cost that this may increase to the private consumers, and think about if there's ways to either offer incentives over strict legislation, control the amount of greenhouse gas a project can produce. That's something I'm not really familiar with. I want to look and see what other municipalities have done around this and how it's enforceable and how we can legislate around it. I think generally it's a good idea. Overall, we need to try to make ourselves energy independent. EV charging station infrastructure, absolutely, whether that takes the form of actual stations installed or the ability or just the requirement to be EV charge station ready. Yes. Was there something I missed? D, requirement for rooftop solar on new construction. Yes, I think we should be solar ready. Solar adds additional cost to some projects. So again, when you install something like a PACE program, where I mentioned earlier, you can then go back and install solar, but your building be ready for it. Councilor Gomez.
Just to everything. As a city, we have to send a message to the new developers that are coming to our city. And it's that we are a green community. They have to be sure that we're working with that. So yes to everything. I mean, not to everything, but to the questions, yes, yes, and yes. I think the solar roofs, yes. To the EV chargers and combine with that too. I think that's perfect. And again, I think we should send a message to the new developer that we're a green community and that's the way they have to go.
I would agree with all of the above. I mean, and in a new building situation, it just makes the most sense. You know, if it's not sited appropriately for solar panels, as in they're not going to produce energy, obviously you're not gonna force somebody to put solar panels, so it's yes to these new buildings that are appropriately sited.
I say yes, but I do put caution into it, because there are some buildings that are, we don't want to create an environment, like say we're building all new houses, and all new houses have to have solar on them. These are gonna be expensive houses. What kind of a community do we want to be? Do we want to be a community that's only allowing in people who can afford these things? So I think that, again, my knee-jerk reaction is yes, but I'd want to look at the full breadth of what this does and what the downstream effect of this would be. So I think it's something we can put in requests for proposals for buildings that we are controlling. Again, I look at those school buildings. You know, we can put that in our request for proposals that they have to have these green things in them. Absolutely. I think we can find ways to support it by, is there some way that we can do any kind of tax break in the East City part of it, or Easthampton part of it? You know, what else can we do to support people going with these things? Yeah, and then everything else my colleague said. At this point, we're sort of, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in the spirit of all of them, I support them, but I would have to know, I don't have enough knowledge on these specific topics to, but if, in the spirit of them, I support them.
Okay, I'm gonna make a suggestion. I get a sense that people wanna keep to the time frame. There are a couple of follow-ups which I think can be looked at together. There was one more question about land use, which is not reducible to yes, no type of things. I'm gonna suggest to folks again, if you wanna have a chance to look at the questions, if you want us, there were answers prepared, we can get them out to you rather than taking time. So I'm gonna leave to the follow-up transportation questions, if that's okay with folks. Is that all right? Sure. Okay, so here's one question, which is why does Easthampton discourage and charge for school buses, which is vastly preferable to individual parents driving their kids? Would you support free school buses, paying families to, well, let's leave it. Would you support free school buses?
Sorry, it says free school buses or even subsidizing is probably the word, something like that.
Okay. Some way subsidizing that cost. We'll start with the Lindsay.
I can start. I'm gonna use your words. In the spirit of the question, yes, I think we should have it. But we have to be careful with it. So, because from where are we gonna get the money? The school budget is tight. The city budget is tight. So, definitely, I wanna see that. Well, how we're gonna do it, we have to take the precautions, and we have to be really careful where we're gonna cut the money, from where we're gonna get the money to do that. But the spirit of the question, yes.
I would agree. I would also like to see service expanded to those families who are just outside the limit of busing,
Yeah,
and they're
there's a whole thread of
they're
this.
having to drive in. I've heard a lot of discussions over the years of that, so I'm all for free busing and an expansion of school bus use.
I say there's nothing free, so free busing is gonna be paid for by somebody, as we were saying, so, you know, is this a question we bring to the taxpayers? Is this something that the people in Easthampton are willing to pay for? Is it a subsidized program? But again, now we're talking about the people who can afford to subsidize that, you know, so it's something worth looking into, I think.
Sorry, right now people are, it's not subsidized, but people can't afford it, or they say they can't. There's been lots of discussion about it, so therefore they drive their cars. This
Right.
is supposed to be about climate. I'm sorry, where I'm a dual national, Extinction Rebellion is what they call it. And we're talking about a little more, a little less. I just feel, I'll just say quickly, every single thing, school buses just came to me, every single thing that goes through, look at the climate impact. I know we can't redo the PVTA all on ourselves, but every single thing, so I don't know, paying for sidewalks on both sides of the streets, for just all those little things. Like maybe we can make big, beautiful Easthampton welcomes you bus stops. You can't even find it. Somebody passed, Irishman, passed my house halfway up Holyoke Street because he couldn't even see the bus stop because he's from a civilized place where they actually assume that public transportation comes first and your individual car, whether it's solar or electric or whatever the hell, is second. I mean, probably everybody here's it.
I like all the cans.
I'm sorry, but
It's
it's,
okay.
I just
You're
want
right.
to make that sort
I
of shift
mean, I
in
just
thinking.
echo Laura and everyone else's comments. I do, you know, I would support the spirit of subsidizing and getting everyone to school, but I haven't examined it enough. I don't know enough about it.
I would definitely support it, you know, I mean, it's free up to a certain grade, and I think, and then they charge. You know, I think that, everybody should be free, it was free while I grew up in town, so, I think it should be that way, again, and we can look at other options for funding it.
Yes, what everyone here said, obviously, ideally, yes, but, the money has to come from somewhere, and let's figure that out.
And finally, on the issue of electric vehicles, shouldn't the goal for Easthampton be to use electric vehicles, not hybrids as an example, and other electric battery operated equipment? Used electric vehicles are available and very reduced in price, and repairs of electric vehicles have very few annually. As an example, I think this individual has a Leaf that has cost her nothing for a year and a half. Use of electric vehicles. Anyone want to make a comment?
Yeah,
That's
I mean-
making a leap instead of
Exactly.
Yeah.
wrong.
Right,
Yeah.
instead of doing the
That's a
hybrid, I mean,
good leap.
obviously,
It's a sure thing.
Right, as I said earlier, it's like, this may be one of those areas that we try to push for to say, because the return on that investment is so
I
great.
mean, 10 years limping along to hybrids, does that really make sense if we're talking about paradigm shifts and leaps? I don't think.
Well,
So
one
I
thing
hope
we
we'll
really
all
have to be
urge
careful.
our mayor to think a little more about that.
Some of them chose not to get an electric vehicle recently, and my family, it had to do with the fact that, yeah, we were excited about the fact that they now go 250 miles between charges. And my wife drives to Connecticut for work, and so she was sick. But it wasn't comfortable for her. She would have ended up with a massive back problem with the car. So, you know, those are things that when you're looking at doing things, you have to sort of.
Well,
Well,
I'm
that's, I
glad
don't
you're
think
making
that's
the comment
related to
because
using electric.
this is
No,
an
no, I'm saying
opportunity,
this is
I want,
things
first of all,
that-
there's an opportunity to have an
It's not just
interaction.
too electric.
We've got more refreshments. And I want to thank all the candidates. I don't know what the mayor was talking about difficult questions. You all did really great, and we're very appreciative of you coming.
Thank you, Steve.
That-
Thank you.